Big dog, we need to talk about the remote duel YCS. While people may see some doom and gloom, I actually see some really positive things about Yu-Gi-Oh! And the information that I'm going to give you could completely change your game. So today, not only will I be giving you a quick recap and an analysis, I'll be giving you some information to think over that will make you a better player. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day, phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I think the remote duel YCS is a very interesting one, and it's mainly because everybody gets a chance to play. In theory, this is the most accessible YCS because all you need is a webcam and a computer. The webcam can pretty much be your phone, and you can play at the library. Probably not the best idea. Also, in theory, in lieu of traveling, which consists of the trip there and back, hotel, food, entertainment, you can actually buy your own PC and a webcam and still have a little bit of change left over depending on where you're going. Traveling to different YCSs across the country can be very expensive, so I actually do like the idea of a remote YCS. But at the same time, it also seems that players don't like the sentiment overall. YCS Remote consisted of only 429 players, which is way lower than a normal YCS, but I think that there's actually other factors into play. Granted, from the players that I talked to, a remote YCS can be a lot less desirable. Players haven't really gotten over a lot of the cheating scandals that have happened in the past, and remote YCS is at that really weird spot where you have interaction with your opponent, but not on the exact same level as in person. It's still being a physical card game, meaning that you need to have the physical cards, but at the same time don't get the benefits of playing physical Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be a really big turnoff for players. And then you add in the factor that it is fall. A lot of people are spending time with their families. If you're staying at home and grandma comes downstairs with the knitted sweater and hot chocolate, I'd be more tempted to spend time with Gams than actually play Yu-Gi-Oh! And almost interact with somebody online. And I think that that shows for remote duel YCS. While 429 players is pretty big for an online tournament, it doesn't necessarily compare to an in-person North American YCS. But overall, I want to know your thoughts about a remote YCS and if they should continue it. Me personally, I don't think I would ever attend one. For me, the only thing that it has to do with it is that I value the person-to-person interaction. A lot of times I'll just go to my local shop for a couple hours and vibe and chill with the boys, making sure the shop manager is running my shop correctly. Other times I want to spend my weekend with Bird and my kids and chill. And then there's always Top Deck TJ, Wesley, and everybody else. Not to mention football, I could never miss a game. Coach Callie's undefeated, by the way. We won 30-0. And I still managed to do all of the research and get you the information you need about this particular YCS. Like Superman or something, or at least the equivalent. Moving on to some really popular cards that were used for the event, I noticed that Forbidden Droplet has seen an uptick in play. Now, Droplet does Droplet things. It hasn't really changed from the beginning. I think being able to negate powerful, popular cards in the format like Azamina, Rhea, Silvera, and Fiendsmith Desiree is really powerful. But also using your own Forbidden Droplet to send Fiendsmith Desiree from your field to the graveyard can also trigger its effect. I also seen a lot of the Triple Tactics cards in full effect. Because we are in a format where hand traps are always at the ready, Triple Tactics talent in the right deck can completely change the game. We should already know that. But Triple Tactics Thrust has taken on a bigger role as of recently, and it's mainly because of the Molcharmy cards, but overall it's just really good. A lot of players were using Triple Tactics Thrust to be able to set powerful trap cards like Different Dimension Ground if they're going against a graveyard reliant deck, Dimensional Barrier if you're going against strategies like Tempai, and even Threatening Roar to buy you another turn against any deck. And then of course, Thrust can also search talents and other normal spell cards to be able to help you keep playing. Roland Lockbird is the last card I want to talk about that has seen a significant increase in play. This card is really good against Snake Eyes Azamina and Snake Eyes Fire King Azamina because this deck needs to search a lot of times in order to get its full combo going. It's also another one of those cards that's a pretty good counter to the Molcharmy cards, especially if you don't need to search a lot on your turn. You see, the thing that I've noticed about Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now is that while the Molcharmy cards are powerful, they're not the end-all be-all. In fact, you can actually top a YCS without the Molcharmy cards. I said this a few times before, but I think the remote YCS and later Anaheim will further prove this. And the next big thing I want to talk about is that it is a pretty diverse format. Yes, the strongest decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are still Snake Eyes, Tempai, and Yubel. But that does not mean that those are the only strategies that can compete. In fact, Almost any deck can compete in this Yu-Gi-Oh format, which makes it so fun. Let's go ahead and look at the top 32 breakdown, which is kind of cool. Inside of the top 32, there were 8 Tenpai, 3 Yubel, 13 Snake Eyes or Fire King variants, 1 Unchained, 1 Katsura, 3 Centurion, 1 Exodia, 1 White Forest, 1 Mermail, 1 Memento. Now, would I like to see some of those other decks a little bit more represented? Of course. But as the tournament goes on, you'll start to see that these top strategies get filtered out by some of the other strategies, which is still really good for Yu-Gi-Oh! In fact, let's go ahead and look at Samantha Tyler's, also known as Scarlon's Memento deck. It almost exemplifies how a good Yu-Gi-Oh deck can still be budget, and also even when you don't have all of the cards, you can still compete. As you can see, this particular deck profile is decently budget, and one thing I want to point out is that Scarlon said that Mochomi Forest was never played. So in theory, you could have made this a 40 card deck and go ahead and play with it. Another thing that Scarlon did say is that Triple Tactics Thrust is a card that they wanted to play but couldn't get a hold of. And overall, I've been saying this for quite some time, is that the meme team is quite the Yu-Gi-Oh deck. There's no Fiendsmith, there's no Azamina, there's no Katsura, no other engines, just straight bones. And this can exemplify how diverse the format can be. Now, there's a few other strategies that I want to show you inside of top 32, because every single one of these decks are cheap Yu-Gi-Oh decks that does not need Mochomi Forest. Taking a look at Rolando Roman's Centurion Super Heavy Samurai deck. Patterson, if you're watching this, do not get any crazy ideas. I think that this shows that creativity is not dead in Yu-Gi-Oh! Holy crap, look at all these spell cards for your Super Heavy Samurais. How are you pulling that off? I think that this is one of the more fun decks to look at, and with only 12 hand traps, Shifter, Droll, Ash, Imperm, you could consider the Bestial monsters, but I wouldn't really. It shows that this could be a well-balanced deck. Now, if you don't look at the Mochomi Forest, then the deck becomes a lot cheaper. But one thing I do want to point out is that Mochomi Forest is in the side deck. I think in a world where more people side deck Mochomi Forest, it will become a lot cheaper of a Yu-Gi-Oh card. But since the census right now is that this is a main deck staple, players are going to use it. And one of the main factors that I noticed of players playing this inside of the main deck is that a lot of strategies have ways to be able to get rid of cards from the hand. So it's almost no drawback of playing Mochomi Forest inside of your main board, because if you're playing a deck that discards, if you draw it going first, you just discard it. And then another cool card that I want to get you guys on game is Gravity Collapse. This card sends one face-up synchro monster you control to the graveyard. When your opponent summons a monster, you negate the summon, and then your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end phase of the turn. Great. Floodgates. I remember telling people to buy this card before it skyrockets in price a long time ago, and I'm not sure if this is the time, but if it does, I told you so. Next is a Tenpai Dragon deck list that does not use any of the Molcharmy cards. I don't remember your exact name, but there was a particular person that wondered if there was a Tenpai Dragon deck list that didn't play the Charmies. And Big Dog, here you have it, another successful Tenpai Dragon deck list that does not use the Molcharmies. And while I think that Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is a busted Yu-Gi-Oh card, one card that I think that Tenpai Dragons should put themselves onto is Grand Tusk Dragon. It can target 2 other cards on the field and destroy it when it's normal summoned or special summoned. I.e., when you use seals to summon a monster from the deck, you now have an option to Kwaki Miru Drago, or you have Grand Touch Dragon, which can destroy 2 cards on the field. Doesn't really matter. Lastly, we have the Fiendsmith Centurion Whitewoods, but to be honest, this is really just Whitewoods. I personally like how Whitewoods have evolved. It's no longer just a runic deck, it's a deck that can be played alongside of multiple engines. This time around, both the Fiendsmith and Centurion cards are good to go. Moving on to top 16, things do get a little bit worse for those other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. We lose White Forest, Mermail, and Memento, as the top 16 consists of 3 Tenpai, 1 Yubel, 7 Fire King and Snake Eyes deck, 1 Unchained, 1 Katsura, and 1 Exodia. Exodia is a crazy deck, and looking at Michael Tom Kenny's deck, you can kind of see how this deck be cooking. I mean, look at this deck, Big Dog. It's straight fire. Playing all 5 pieces of Exodia. It's a reason why those cards are limited. In all seriousness, this deck is really good at being able to set up the unstoppable Exodia Incarnate, which is a lot harder to get rid of than it looks. But then there's also some other cards in here like Secret Village of the Spellcasters, Dimension Shifter, you know, just a little bit of razzle dazzle, just in case your opponent gets a little bit too active. And what I absolutely love about this, which I think is going to be a hidden card in the meta, is super polymerization. Super polymerization is really good right now, especially if people are playing Fiendsmith and Azamina in the same deck, because you can actually super poly those cards off into quite a few targets. But in this particular deck, we're playing the Chaos Star Source Dragon, 1 lighter Dark Dragon monster plus 1 Dragon monster, so pretty easy to summon, 1 Dragostapelia, 1 Guru, and 1 Mud Dragon. I genuinely think that super polymerization can be a really good card. And some people will say that Exodia is lucky. Well, this is just another huge top that Exodia can have under its belt. I think that it's a genuine contender, and we need to stop playing with this strategy's name. Now, here's where things start to get really tricky. 1 Tempai, 1 Yubel, 4 Fire King Snake Eyes, 1 Azamina, 1 Kashtira. Snake Eyes Azamina dominated half of the pie chart until top 4. I think it just goes to show that this deck is one of the strongest decks in the game, but not unbeatable. Because when you move to top 4, that's where things get really interesting. You get 1 Tempai, 1 Yubel, 1 Fire King, 1 Unchained. Now, having one deck in the top 4 isn't the end of the world for this deck. I think it just exemplifies how some of the other strategies can compete really well and incredibly hard. And to be honest, I really wish I could have shown you the top 8 build for Cesar Gonzalez, because I think that Kashtira is incredibly cool. But out of all of the top decks, there's still one rogue deck remaining, and it is Unchained Fiendsmith Magical Musketeer. Congratulations to everyone that has topped the YCS remote, and thank you to the guys that have put their deck profile early to allow me to make this video. But as you can see, Darian Nguyen got that dog in him. Fiend is one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh types, and this deck is crazy cool. I think that it's getting closer and closer to a Fiend pile, because we're losing out on the Unchained, we're increasing the Fiendsmith and the Magical Musketeers, and what this deck does best is just make a board despite what your opponent does. It's one of those strategies that a lot of players thought was rogue, but has turned a lot of heads. It's pretty damn good. And if you ask me, it just goes to show that the diversity of this format is still very much there. You can build a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy and be pretty successful with it if you follow a formula. And thankfully, that formula isn't required for you to spend a lot of money on. You don't need to buy the Molchermi cards. I'm actually pretty excited for the deck diversity that has been shown for the remote YCS, and I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section what were you most excited for. And for the big dogs that want to see all of the deck list, I'll be sure to leave it down below as a pinned comment as well as in the description. Until then, I'm actually streaming on Twitch right now, so you can go ahead and check me out. We're going to be playing Master Duel, showing replays and having fun, but if I can't catch you there, I'll just catch you on the next video. Go ahead and check out one of these.